Hi everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. We're going to get back to doing some tractor stuff. I really need to get that 48.8N and the Fordson behind it finished, or at least rolling and moving again. They've been sitting there for months while I did other stuff. But anyway, before I get to those two, we got to deal with this guy. This is the Parts 8N that we bought a few weeks ago. So we're going to tear into this thing and see what the heck we could find that's salvageable, usable, horse tradable, and go from there. The first thing I do want to do is take the cylinder head off and see how bad the engine is, because it's stuck, but I don't know how bad. I don't know if it's been full of water or if it's just one cylinder that's stuck. You don't know until you open them up. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the cylinder head off and have a look down in there. That'll be the first thing we do. Man, I tell you, it was fun getting this thing in here. It's only got one tire that holds air, and the clutch is stuck and the engine is seized. So you couldn't break the connection between the back wheels and the engine. Oh, we had a heck of a time getting it in here, but we finally got it in. So we'll start taking her apart. So I got the head off. You can see this cylinder here and this cylinder here have had water in them. This one, much more. How it got in there, hard to say. It usually with the updraft carburetor, it's pretty hard for the cylinders to get full of water, but obviously it's happened to these ones. So whether or not water, sometimes if this gasket leaks a little bit, water could get in through there. It's hard to say. But anyway, I'm going to get the vacuum and clean this thing all up. And then we'll put some transmission fluid in it and let it soak overnight and see if we can get it busted free. Wasn't too bad at all. I actually got it busted free. I tried with the bar. That wouldn't do it. But what I did do was get a pry bar in on the teeth of the flywheel, and that popped it free. So now we're going to work it around a bit, and as the pistons go down, I'm going down in the bores with a flex hone and cleaning them up so the rings are not running over all that crud that's left in there. I have to get, hopefully I can get just the top of this one here. And then if that's the case, it'll probably need a set of rings because they'll be all stuck. But you can buy a set of rings cheap enough, and we may be able to freshen up this engine and have a good running, a good used engine. I've got it turning around nicely. Now we've got some stuck valves to contend with. They're not really that big a deal. You just kind of tap them down, and when they come up, you tap them back down again if they're supposed to be down and they're still up, and all the while spraying oil on the stems, and eventually they sort themselves out. So after a lot of turning it over and spraying oil and wiggling stuff, I've got all the valves free. They're all opening and closing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my stud puller and pull these studs out. There's 7 of them. Then we can go ahead and clean the deck of the block. And we'll clean the head. And we'll put it back together. And we'll see if we can get her cranked up. In the end, trying to get those studs out was going to end up in a disaster. If I had time, I could just get it there and put a little heat to them and take them out one by one. But I'm just goofing around to see if this thing will run. So at this point, it's not a big deal. So I just worked around the studs, got the deck cleaned up. We're going to put the same head gasket back on because it seemed to have survived. And then we'll stick a starter in it and wind it over and see if it's got any compression. Well, here goes nothing. I wound it over a little bit and didn't really see any oil pressure coming up. But what we're going to do right now is give it a compression test. That'll tell us a lot. And if it's got good compression, then we'll try and start it. And once it's running, then we'll see if the oil pressure comes up. Well, cylinder number 4 don't look too promising, does it? You can't really read too much into this. I have seen stuff like this before when they've been sitting for a long time. There's junk on the valve faces and stuff, and if you can get them to start, sometimes they'll clean themselves up. Sometimes they won't. Anyway, let's see what number 3 has to say for itself. $50. Okay, number 2, what do you got? Oh, absolutely nothing. That's not good. Well, let's see if there's anybody home in number 1. Oh, number 1 sounds better. Let's see, what did we get? Oh yeah, 40. All right, now I'm going to pull the distributor off and we'll just have a fast look at that and see if it looks like we can get some spark out of it. I'm confident that 40, 50, 40, we should be able to get this thing to start. And then once we get it to start, we'll run it a little bit. Can't run it too much, there's no cooling system. But we'll run it a little bit and then recheck our compression. That's cute. Right away you can see here somebody has probably somewhere along the line lost the nut for the stud, for the primary of the ignition coil, so they just soldered a wire to it. That's fine, we can work with that. Well, you can see here this distributor's had water in it. So we're going to have to spend a little time and get this all cleaned up. And then we'll make sure our contacts are working. And then we should be good to go. Alright, we got that out. It's all still stuck together, but we can work on that. Now we're going to get the housing cleaned up. And then we can start kind of putting it back together. Now we got to deal with the advance mechanism. It is stuck. So the cam and the weights, they're held on with this tiny little circlip with a little thrust washer underneath it. So you get that off, and then we're going to very gently try and get this off because we don't want to mar the cam. So we're going to at first just try to work some oil down into it and see how that works out. I mean, it moves with a wrench. You just can't, it's not going to move how it's supposed to in the tractor, you know, flying out by centrifugal force and then returning by spring. So we're going to have to work this in here or get this thing apart and clean it up. There, I managed to get it off. Now I can go to the buffing wheel, clean up this shaft, and then we'll put a bottle brush down in there to clean up that bushing. There we go. Perfect. So now we can put the shaft back in the housing, and then we can start working on the electrical part of this thing. So it looks like somewhere along the line somebody replaced the whole breaker plate in this thing. So we'll get the points off of there and clean them up, and then do all our continuity checks. So a lot of times what you'll find happens with these, everything seems okay, and you just can't get the darn thing to fire. And what happens is this little insulator here degrades and allows the primary current, which is coming down through here, to go directly to ground before it ever gets to the points. And then you're done. This thing will never start in 1,000 years. So we'll test all of that. First we have to pull this tiny cotter pin out, and then we'll get the points off of there. First thing we'll test is this insulator at the top. This one also fails, and it will allow the primary current to go directly to ground. We don't want that. So we can hear that. I'm touching the brass insert there. making sure we have continuity to the strap, which is good. But we do not want continuity to ground. And so far, so good. Nothing going to ground. We'll double check it once we've got it all together. Now we'll use a little points file here, and we'll file the points. They're actually pretty good. Yeah, that one's good. Now we'll do the other side. Now that is some kind of ugly. We would never get any fire out of this. Let me clean it up. So it's pretty faint, but this thing's buzzing away and showing continuity. So we can open the points, and we're good. Close the points. So that's good. We can go ahead and put the breaker plate back in the housing. Now we're going to adjust the points. So we turn I just hold it by the drive tang, and then we turn it till it's up on the cam, and we want 25 thousandths. So these points right now are just a little bit tight. So all you do is you loosen the mounting screws, and you use the cam screw here to open and close them. Now we're just doing a quick check of the primary side of the coil. We've got continuity, and we've got around 0.5 ohm, which is pretty good. That's about what you want to see. Another check we can do is when we've got it hooked up and ignition current running through it, you want to see 3.5 to 4 amps flowing through that, and you know it's pretty good. We never know if it's going to work or not. I don't even know if this is a 6 or 12 volt coil. There is really no such thing as a 12 volt coil for these. They were all originally 6 volt. And then the aftermarket made coils with a higher resistance, I think higher resistance primary winding, so you could run them on 12 volts without melting them. This had a 6 volt battery in it, so I'm assuming this is just a standard run-of-the-mill 6 volt coil. So we'll make sure we've got at least one ballast resistor in line to make sure we don't burn up the coil or the points. Unfortunately, the only way to really tell if this actually works is to put it on the distributor, put some power to it, and spin it around and see if she sparks. Now we'll turn our attention to this. You can see here, this cap is junk because it's cracked. It's split right down the secondary tower here. This here, you got to make sure that is clean. That is how the coil, through this little tang here, delivers the secondary current down to the center button to the rotor, and it in turn flies around and sends it out to the cylinders. This will end up carbon tracked and cause all kinds of problems. But for now, I think we should be okay to use this just to get this thing fired up. Now we can put the distributor back on. And remembering from our previous videos that you can only put this in one way. You see the slot in the end of the camshaft is slightly offset. Right now as we're looking at it, it's offset a little bit to the left. So we set this up the same way when we're looking at it because it'll be flipped around. We're going to offset it to the right. So when we put it in the engine, you'll feel it. It'll go right in. If you really have to struggle to get this thing to go in there, you've probably got it backwards. And it'll let you sort of get it started. And especially these later distributors with the aluminum housings, you'll break it as soon as you try to tighten the bolts. So be really, really wary of that. Cooper and Nugget have decided to join us in the shop today for the festivities. I think somebody just got an itch. Anyway, they're quickly outgrowing this big crate. They used to just about disappear in there, but we're going to have to work on some kind of other arrangement, I guess, or just get another one of these. I don't know where the heck we would put 2 of them out here. I'm supposed to keep this place clean enough so that they can just run around in here. We were getting to that stage with Harley before she passed on. But I've got this place in such a mess now, it's hardly safe for me, never mind these 2. All right, so let's see what happens. I've got the ignition hooked up. And we're turning the engine. Oh, sparky. That's good. All right, we're in good shape. So we've got our meter on the 10 amp scale, and we're going to put it across the ignition now. And you can see it's drawing almost 6 amps. So that's no good. We need to add more resistance into the circuit. So that's better. We've got 2 ballast resistors in series, and it's making about 3.5 amps of current flow in the primary ignition circuit. That's good. So we'll get this into a little bit more of a better connections and stuff, so it's not going to all fall apart as soon as I start turning the thing over. And then we'll recheck our readings, and then we'll see about getting some fuel to it. This carburetor is going to be a big project just on its own. So what we're going to do for now, we're just going to borrow the carburetor from our 48. I know it works properly, so we'll just stick that on here. So we've got our carburetor on, my little temporary fuel system here. I put about that much gas in it. I use 2-stroke gas to get them cranked up when they haven't been running, because hopefully the oil in it will give the piston rings and stuff a fighting chance anyway. So now we're going to see if we can get it cranked up. Well, here goes nothing. Heaven knows what's about to happen. Hopefully we catch whatever it is on video. I'm putting on a pair of headphones too, because this thing got no muffler at all. Okay, so first we're going to hook up the ignition. Got a spark, that's good. Now we're going to make sure it's in neutral. Throttle's about halfway. Let's see what happens. Trying. So I think I might have flooded it out a little bit with the carburetor needle valve sticking and whatnot. But anyway, I've done another compression test and they've all come up. That one first time had 40, now it's got 50. This one had 50, now it's got 75. This one went from 0 to 40, and the number 1 is up to 90. So I think we're in good shape. I'm just going to let it sit for another little bit, let the battery charge back up. We'll double check that we're getting spark, and then we'll try and crank it up again. Well, let's try again. What? Got a little sputter there, eh? Well, let's have another go at it. Man, it's trying to go, it just won't go. It runs good too. Jeez, it even idles nice. I'm gonna shut it off now. We'll get the plugs out and give her another compression test. So even though the oil pressure gauge shows no oil pressure whatsoever, it did manage to squeeze a whole bunch of oil up past the lid of the filter there. So obviously it's moving some oil. That's good. We're going to see if we can tighten this up a bit. Nope. Well, that'll explain our oil leak. You can see here the gasket was twisted. I got to look around in my stuff and see if I've got one. There we go. Found one. Now I'm not sure about the gasket under the head of the bolt here. We're going to need something for there also. Alright, so I took the oil pressure gauge off and kind of blew through all the lines, and the line is clear, and I tickled the gauge with a little bit of air and it seems to work. So we're going to crank this thing up again and see if we've got any oil pressure. Pretty good. So that was pretty good. I had earlier stolen the spark plugs out of the 48-8N over there because while this one had the wrong ones in it, they haven't got enough reach. You need a longer reach plug than that for these things. And I'm not sure if these are a problem or not, but I swapped them back into it. The second time I ran it, it didn't run as good. So I got to look around in my stuff and see if I've got a decent used set of the proper spark plugs for a Ford tractor, and we'll get them put in it. And I also want to try, even though I saw oil pressure on this gauge, I'm still suspect of it. So we will try a different gauge on there tomorrow and make sure, or at least double check the reading that we got off of this. That'll do it for now, I guess. In the next video, now that we know it runs, there's a couple of questions I want answered. I'm going to put another oil pressure gauge on it. We'll get it cranked up again and just confirm if that gauge was accurate, showing 20 pounds at high speed, or if the gauge was, it looked a little sketchy. So we'll double check that. I also want to get it running and see if the hydraulic lift works and the PTO and all that stuff. And then once I know that, I guess we can blow it apart. Anyway, until then, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the Claremont Classic Garage. So long.